General Ayanna Brooks woke up before dawn as she always did, the discipline of decades in the military etched deep into her bones. The house was silent, except for the quiet hum of her old coffee maker. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, her Medal of Honor gleaming from the corner of the room like a silent guardian. Ayanna wasn't just a soldier, she was a living legend. But today wasn't a battlefield or a base, today she was going to court. Ayanna's heart felt heavy as she thought about why she had to be there. A land dispute had erupted between her veterans' housing program and a large real estate developer determined to push them out. She had founded the housing program to help struggling veterans rebuild their lives, to give them a place of dignity and hope. But the developer saw only profit. Ayanna never sought conflict off the field. But when pushed, she stood for her people with unbreakable resolve. She carefully pinned on her medal, knowing its story wasn't just hers. It belonged to every fallen friend, every young recruit she guided home, and every life she saved. As she stepped out, neighbors saluted her. Young mothers nodded with admiration. Children ran to the fences to wave. Ayanna responded with a gentle smile and a slight bow of her head, as if every gesture carried a sacred weight. In the car, her mind drifted to memories, missions in the desert, evacuations in hurricane zones, comforting young soldiers trembling in fear. She had carried countless burdens, but today felt heavier. As her car approached the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters crowded around, shouting questions about the case. Ayanna stepped out slowly, her tall figure calm against the chaos. "General Brooks, do you think you'll win?" someone yelled. She didn't answer. She only walked forward, eyes locked on the courthouse doors, her medal shining defiantly against her chest. Inside, the hallways echoed with whispers. Some people stared in awe, others in silent resentment. Ayanna kept her back straight, her eyes clear. Today wasn't just about land, it was about what that land represented: honor, community, sacrifice. And as she waited outside the courtroom, she knew she wasn't only fighting a legal battle. She was confronting centuries of bias, the silent stares that followed her through the years, the whispered doubts that tried to reduce her worth to the color of her skin. Judge Whitaker was a man known for his sharp tongue and colder heart. He entered the courtroom that morning with his chin high, scanning the crowd for weaknesses as if he were a predator hunting in the wild. When he saw Ayanna standing there, her uniform spotless, her Medal of Honor resting proudly on her chest, his face stiffened. He leaned toward the bailiff and whispered something that made the young man shrink back in discomfort. When Ayanna entered the courtroom, a hush fell over the room. Even those who doubted her felt her presence, the quiet strength in her movements, the history she carried in every step. She sat at the front, her lawyer beside her, but her gaze stayed fixed on Whitaker. The judge slammed the gavel. "General Brooks," he called out, his voice echoing through the wooden benches. "This is a courtroom, not a parade ground. Remove that medal immediately." Gasps filled the air, and even Ayanna's attorney looked stunned. Ayanna rose slowly, her eyes meeting Whitaker's without flinching. "Your Honor," she said softly but firmly, "this medal is not an ornament. It is the soul of my service, a symbol of sacrifices beyond your imagination." Whitaker's eyes narrowed. "You are in contempt!" he barked, his voice cracking with barely hidden fury. Ayanna didn't move. She stood there like an ancient oak rooted in the earth, unshakable. Whispers turned to murmurs of support, and even the clerk dropped her pen, stunned by the unfolding defiance. Outside, news began to spread quickly. Videos were uploaded to social media within minutes. "Judge humiliates Black General," the headlines read. But inside, the tension only grew. Ayanna's lawyer, a young man named Miles, leaned over and whispered, "We can file a motion, but you might be arrested." Ayanna shook her head slightly. "Some fights can't wait for motions, Miles," she murmured. A woman in the back stood up suddenly. "I lost my husband in the war, and General Brooks brought his body home," she cried out, tears flowing down her face. Another man rose. "She saved my son in Afghanistan." And then a young woman joined in. "She helped me get back on my feet after my deployment." One by one, voices rose in a swelling tide of support. The judge pounded the gavel frantically, yelling for order, but the room had transformed. It was no longer just a courtroom. It had become a stage for truth, a place where suppressed stories rose like an unstoppable tide. Ayanna turned slowly to face the people, her eyes misty but her expression strong. For the first time, Whitaker seemed truly afraid. His power, once absolute, felt as thin as a fragile glass. Ayanna stepped forward, her voice calm but echoing across the hushed courtroom. "This medal is not just mine. It is every mother's prayer, every soldier's final breath, every family's silent hope. You can try to strip it from me, but you will never erase what it stands for." The judge leaned back, his hands trembling. His mind swirled with the sudden realization of the weight of his prejudice, the faces now staring at him with disgust, disappointment, and defiance. Outside the courthouse, more people gathered, chanting Ayanna's name, holding up signs that read, "Honor cannot be silenced. We stand with General Brooks." Ayanna looked back at the judge. For a fleeting second, he looked like a lost child who had stumbled into a fight he could never win. The general saw it all, the years of prejudice that shaped him, the hollow pride that filled his every decision. Yet, in her heart, she felt no hatred, only a deep sadness for the many who had never learned compassion. She turned to Miles. "Let's finish this case," she said. Her lawyer nodded, emboldened by the shift in energy. Suddenly, the bailiff stepped forward, trembling. "Your Honor!" "I cannot enforce this order," he stammered, dropping his eyes. Whitaker looked at him, utterly defeated, and fell silent. The room, for the first time, felt free. In the following days, news outlets flooded the town. Videos of the courtroom confrontation went viral, sparking debates nationwide about race, honor, and justice. People from every corner of the country sent letters, flowers, and messages of gratitude. Veterans groups organized vigils, and young people painted murals of Ayanna, showing her in uniform, medal gleaming under the words, "Dignity before authority." Despite the media storm, Ayanna stayed humble. She spent her days visiting her veteran housing program, hugging elderly residents, helping repair leaky roofs, and listening to young veterans' fears and hopes. They saw in her not just a decorated general, but a human being who had walked the same dark valleys, who understood the invisible battles they fought every day. One afternoon, a young girl about 10 approached her timidly. "General Brooks, I want to be like you," she whispered. Ayanna knelt down, her eyes kind and bright. "You don't have to be like me," she said softly. "You have to be the best version of yourself. That is your true honor." The girl nodded, tears sparkling in her eyes, and ran to her mother. Watching them go, Ayanna felt the warmth of 100 sunrises blooming in her chest. Meanwhile, Judge Whitaker faced an ethics review and intense public scrutiny. In private moments, he wrestled with shame and regret. His face aged overnight, haunted by the echo of Ayanna's words. He issued a public apology, but the damage to his reputation was irreversible. In time, he resigned, a humbled man, forever changed by the woman he once sought to humiliate. On the day the final verdict for the land dispute came in, Ayanna stood again before the courthouse, surrounded by hundreds of supporters. As the judge read the decision, the veterans would keep their homes. The crowd erupted in cheers. Ayanna closed her eyes, inhaling deeply, the weight of the battle finally lifting from her shoulders. She didn't raise her fists or shout in triumph. Instead, she bowed her head, honoring every soul who had stood with her. It wasn't just a legal victory, it was a spiritual one, proof that dignity and compassion could defeat even the most entrenched prejudice. That evening, Ayanna visited the community center, where they held a small celebration. Veterans shared stories, children danced around her, and elders recited poems of strength. Ayanna sat quietly, absorbing every laugh, every tear, every note of music. In that joyful chaos, she realized that true medals are not worn on the chest, but carried in the heart. She stepped outside to the quiet night sky, her medal gleaming under the stars. She felt the spirits of her fallen comrades, the prayers of mothers, the dreams of children, all woven into her story. And so the story of General Ayanna Brooks lived on, a testament to unyielding spirit, a beacon for all who are forced to prove their worth simply because of who they are. In a world that often chooses prejudice over love, her story reminded everyone that true power lies in choosing dignity, kindness, and unbreakable courage, even when the world demands otherwise.